Welcome to the Motor Safety Association's webinar on Toolbox Talks. On the agenda for today's webinars, we'll do a brief introduction to Toolbox Talks, go over a Toolbox Talk checklist to help prepare for conducting a Toolbox Talk, look at some guiding tips for delivering effective Toolbox Talks. We will review a Toolbox Talk case study, and I will do a mock Toolbox Talk example. So what exactly are Toolbox Talks? A Toolbox Talk is an informal group discussion that focuses on a particular safety issue. These tools can be used on a daily or weekly basis to promote your safety within your departments. You can use it as a method to promote safety through a Toolbox Talk or discussion. It's also a good opportunity which was intended to facilitate health and safety discussions on the job site, which really is a key method of getting workers involved with health and safety, which sometimes can be a struggle. Sometimes Toolbox Talks could be referred to as a Tailgate Talk. And as far as the people who are delivering the Toolbox Talks, that could vary as well. Generally, it could be a site supervisor, a foreman, a manager of some sort, or a service manager or senior employee initially, but it's always good to get more people involved with Toolbox Talks and have other people involved with delivering them. And we'll give you some tips within this webinar on how to get more people involved in conducting webinars. Just like everything, there are challenges. When it comes to conducting a Toolbox Talk, one might say, it's harvest time and we're so busy right now and we don't have those few minutes to in fact have a Toolbox Talk. And essentially that is when you want to have those Toolbox Talks, when you are very busy, just because so many things are happening that you want to take the time to address those issues before someone is hurt. So it gives you a chance proactively to look at some of those tasks within your dealership and discuss them in a Toolbox Talk environment before someone is hurt, so it's not reactive. But it is a challenge getting people to commit that time to get the Toolbox Talks started. Sometimes people may substitute Toolbox Talks for training, and a Toolbox Talk should not replace your current training program. Say, for example, if your staff need to have training on fall protection, you wouldn't provide only training through a Toolbox Talk. You would still have to provide them with adequate training, and the Toolbox Talk could be more or less be something that could complement your existing training or refresh the training for the staff. So it's good in that regards. You can use it to reiterate some of the previous training that was already taken at your place of business, but it is not a substitute for a training program. And sometimes you hear people saying, well, if I got to pull my staff off of this work order for 10 minutes of time and I times that by how many technicians I have in our dealership, they're not generating revenue. Then I pose the question back saying, how much revenue will an injured tech provide your dealership? So if that technician was injured and they're off the job, they're not going to be generating you any revenue. So our goal is to keep our workers on the job safe and healthy, where they can conduct the business for you and in a safe environment. So those are some challenges, and my job in this webinar is to convince you how to conduct these toolboxes and giving you some tips to overcome these challenges. So there are some benefits of having Toolbox Talks. As I mentioned before, it's a proactive setting, letting people talk about the Toolbox Talks. We're not waiting for an incident to happen before we have the Toolbox Talk. We're being proactive, and we are taking the opportunity to discuss something before we're in a reactive situation or an investigation. It's a great opportunity to get people together, which increases morale because we're working towards a common goal. We may be sharing experiences and working towards that goal of preventing an injury. And again, a good benefit of a Toolbox Talk is encouraging your staff to really add some value to the Toolbox Talk and inspire other staff members to do the same. So there's a lot of good that can come out of Toolbox Talks. We're looking at those hazards proactively. We're getting people together to share their experiences while we're working to a common goal of preventing injuries in the workplace. So there is some legislation in place when it comes to Toolbox Talks, and the legislation does not specifically say you have to conduct Toolbox Talks. However, it says you need to provide training. A Toolbox Talk, as I mentioned, is not a substitute for training, but it will complement and refresh your existing training program. So I like to look at the Regulation 12 at the bottom of this slide. General duties of employers. The duties of an employer at a place of employment include the provision of any information, instruction, training, and supervision that is necessary to protect the health and safety of workers at work. So the regulation is stating we need to provide information and instruction and training. So we can use the Toolbox Talks to provide that information and instruction, and it can refresh and complement your existing training program. So the legislation does mention the fact that people need to have access to that information and instruction. So as we prepare for Toolbox Talks, there are 4 steps that can help you get started. They are choosing a relevant safety topic, being prepared, getting your staff involved in the Toolbox Talks, and following up with Toolbox Talks. So I'm going to explain each 4 of these categories in detail. The relevant topic. Choosing a topic that applies to your staff is one of the most important aspects of having the Toolbox Talk. For example, it is good to broaden your horizons on various topics, but don't talk about welding safety if you don't weld at your shop, nor have a welder, or even work with steel for that matter. So having an effective topic is critical because you're going to get the most benefit, and it's the best use of your time spending it on a topic that's actually relevant to your staff. If you're struggling for a topic, perhaps if you've had a near miss at your place of business, that could equal a Toolbox Talk. And even better is you could ask the person that near miss happened to if they are comfortable sharing their near-miss experience at a Toolbox Talk. So who better to tell that story than the person whom that near-miss happened to? So that's would be an excellent opportunity because, again, a near-miss is we're looking at something proactively before someone is hurt. So a near-miss essentially is a situation that occurred, but if one little thing may have had a different outcome, it would have resulted in an incident. So that's how we define a near miss. And by doing that and controlling the near miss via a Toolbox Talk discussion is going to be very effective in preventing an injury. If you're still looking for topics, observe the staff. What season is it? Is it harvest season? Is it are we changing all the tires over? Is it in the automotive season between fall and winter? Depending on what season we're involved in, we're going to want to, we could take a look at that, and that could be a potential Toolbox Talk for whatever the hazards might be that attribute to that season. And probably the most effective way of obtaining a relevant topic is simply asking the staff, what topic would you like to talk about? And getting that staff involvement, because if you ask somebody for a topic, they give you a topic, and you speak to the hazards and conduct a Toolbox Talk on it, these people are going to be more likely to buy in and give you more input in the future, which is essentially what you want in having a successful safety program and delivering Toolbox Talks. And I mentioned before, when we're struggling for those topics, in the beginning of the webinar I spoke about, we're too busy to have a Toolbox Talk right now. But really, there is no better time than to have a Toolbox Talk than your busy season. Take those 10 minutes, talk about those hazards, use that as a relevant topic because that could make a big difference. If you're still struggling for topics, there are computer programs you can download that will sync a Toolbox Talk calendar perhaps into your email calendar, and then you would have Toolbox Talks for every day of the week. The only drawback to this, however, is if in fact it will be a relevant topic or not. So again, you want to spend that time and choose a relevant topic. So once we've chose that topic, let's get prepared to deliver that Toolbox Talk. We want to prep ourselves, read over the materials we plan to cover. And a good point to do with that is using visual examples or props. So if I'm going to speak about fall protection, I'm going to bring a harness and a lanyard to the Toolbox Talk. And this forces people to use three senses. They're going to hear what I'm saying, they're going to look at my props, and they're going to touch them when I pass around the lanyard and the harness. So that forces people to use those three senses, and it's going to be more effective for them to retain the knowledge. So be prepared to use props and real visual examples. Be sure to have a voice tone that is sounding like you're at least interested or exciting in the topic. Don't just read from script and be dry when you're delivering the Toolbox Talk. Be enthusiastic. If your staff feel that you're an authority on the topic, they're going to listen and they're going to be excited, and it's going to be contagious. So when you deliver your Toolbox Talk, use a voice tone that shows that, hey, I'm excited to do this talk, and this is important, and we're going to have fun learning this. And use a personal story, which is a great way of delivering that message. You may have something that happened to yourself. If you don't have a story, find a story. Look one up on the internet, fall protection in farm equipment dealership. If that's where you work, you can utilize that to assist in delivering of your Toolbox Talk, or a picture of a recent event. And I'll show you at the end of this webinar as I deliver a mock presentation, a mock Toolbox Talk, using a picture to assist in the delivery of the Toolbox Talk. So now that we're prepared to deliver that Toolbox Talk, when we deliver it, we want to have our staff involved. And like I said, we can utilize them to tell a story. We can draw on their experiences to ask, has this happened to anybody, or do you know of anything similar to this that occurred? Don't deliver the Toolbox Talks all by yourself. The staff will eventually tire of hearing your voice. Ask the attendees for feedback and different stories, because this is going to give you the attendees some more information that's going to assist in them retaining the topic that you're discussing. And in some situations, you can delegate staff to do Toolbox Talks. Once they've chosen a topic, we'll say, okay, next week Ken is going to do a Toolbox Talk on chemicals in the workplace. So that'll be his topic. So once people are comfortable and they've worked to make those topics and they can deliver them, it's going to really work in getting your staff involved. But when you are getting your staff involved, there is a fine line between letting the employees steer the Toolbox Talk. They may go on with a story about why fall protection isn't important and why we shouldn't be using it at our business. So we have to be careful when we are engaging employee involvement that we don't let them steer the Toolbox Talk. Get their information and respond accordingly as you're going through that Toolbox Talk. And to ask questions. So you could ask, if you're talking about fall protection, to get the staff involved, you could say something that, so what is the height requirement that I need to have fall protection in place at? To see if they know, or if you mentioned it, to see if they've retained what you had said. So that's a good way to ask questions throughout the Toolbox Talk to ensure people are following your Toolbox topic. And be sure to allow some adequate time at the end of the meeting for questions and suggestions on future topics. Don't cut your time frame too short. So as we've have our staff involved and we've delivered the Toolbox Talk, we can always look into previous suggestions or concerns. Sometimes people may have left you with a question that they want an answer to. Be sure to get that answer and either post it on the safety bulletin board or communicate it at the next Toolbox Talk. If you do not follow up with the question, people are going to quit asking, and they're going to quit being involved, and they're not going to be engaged. So ensure that you follow up with people's inquiries from the Toolbox Talk and report back to them. And when you're having your meeting time, you want to follow through and ensure you have good flow of the meeting. If it's going to be a 10-minute meeting, don't go 20 minutes. If we've allocated a certain amount of time, be sure to stick within that boundary and utilize that time constraint effectively. And in an effort to keep proper minutes of the Toolbox Talk, you could have a sign-in sheet that you circulate and have people signature into the sign-in sheet at the end of the Toolbox Talk to prove due diligence. So ensuring that you follow up with people's inquiries is truly critical in delivering those Toolbox Talks. So some other guidelines for delivering effective talks are the environment that you are having the Toolbox Talk in. I found that actually when you have the Toolbox Talk away from the shop floor, you're going to have people that are less distracted. Opposed to if you have it in the back of your service shop, people could be distracted because there's a lot of things going on in the service shop that they could be looking at the next job they have to do, the air compressor may cut in and so forth. There's distractions. However, you can have your Toolbox Talk in your business, in your service shop, and you can use the equipment as props. So that is an option as well, being in your shop and using the equipment as props. So keep that in mind as you prepare. Just in generally, if you have them in the service shop, there's a lot of distractions, unless perhaps you're using a specific prop as part of your Toolbox Talk. And if you are using training aids, be sure you're ready. If you have a flip chart, make sure there's paper on the flip chart and you have markers so that you are ready to deliver that Toolbox Talk. When you roll out the Toolbox Talk, a very strong introduction and conclusion are very important. And this is critical in delivering the Toolbox Talk, because if we can engage the employee's attention from the start, and if we leave them with a strong conclusion, hopefully they remember our intro and our conclusion at least, and they may not retain everything that we mentioned during the Toolbox Talk, but if we leave them with an effective, perhaps a story to open or a story to conclude, may assist as well as a guideline for delivering that Toolbox Talk. And again, follow through with competency by brief questions and answers that you can utilize to help deliver that Toolbox Talk. And in some situations, you can roll with the punches and you go and ask, so what are you guys working on this week? What are the hazards with that? So you can allow some time for an impromptu Toolbox Talk where we just let's talk about what's going on this week and what are the hazards, and roll with that as well. So those are some different guides in preparing for Toolbox Talks and being willing to adapt to situations as they come up. So as you're delivering the Toolbox Talk, for different tips in being effective is, don't assume that you have all the knowledge on this topic. There may be other people at your business that you can draw on their experience to assist you with. So that's going to help as well, because there may be some environments where people have put in a lot of time at your business, and you can pull their experiences, and the other staff are going to really listen to what they have to say, coming from senior people. It may be a junior person who've had an experience happen to, but keep that in mind. Draw on the experiences of the staff, and don't assume that you have all the knowledge on that subject. There's always opportunities to learn. And don't read verbatim, word for word, from the Toolbox Talk. when I do a toolbox talk, I like to prepare for it, pre-read the sheet, highlight the key areas that I want to speak to, opposed to just reading it word for word. That'll make the toolbox talks more fun, and we can relay the message that this is not word for word, like I've actually prepared for the toolbox talk. And when you're delivering it, don't just be compliant focused and have your toolbox talk because management said you have to do it. Do it because you want to do it. We are doing this toolbox talk because we're generally concerned about your health and safety, and we're relying on your input for suggestions, and we're going to speak to topics that are relevant to you. That has people looking forward to the toolbox talk. They will excitedly wonder, I wonder what the toolbox talk will be about next time. And it really has people engaged just by presenting that information with giving their involvement. Like any good idea or program, there can be challenges or obstacles, and that's no different for delivering effective toolbox talks. Sometimes people may say that everyone is so busy. Ways to minimize that excuse is to pre-book your date and time. So we are going to have our toolbox talk every Friday morning at 8 a.m. So people know ahead of time that we've prepared for this date and time and that they're ready. So that's going to be a helpful point as well, opposed to try and schedule something when everyone's busy. Doing it ahead of time and pre-planning is going to address that concern. Sometimes workers will think the toolbox talks are a waste of time. It's your job to convince them that they are valuable and that they are there for their safety and how we can prevent an injury from happening. They may say, well, things have always been done this certain way at our place of business. Why should we change? There may not be a structured leadership or management. No one's taking responsibility in delivering the toolbox talks. So that can be an obstacle. There may not be enough resources or supervisors to deliver those toolbox talks. So those are real life challenges that people do occur and have to deal with when it comes to presenting toolbox talks. But if we can overcome those challenges, we're going to be very successful. We want to take the toolbox talks seriously. It takes more than just one good toolbox talk to create a safe work environment. Missing a safety toolbox talk on a scheduled date and time is unacceptable without valid reasoning and could be met with discipline depending on the place of employment. This helps to ensure attendance. I've seen in the past when a toolbox talk has been implemented, so every Friday at 8 o'clock we're going to have toolbox talks, and people will consistently come late to the toolbox talk because they were preoccupied by something that is so-called a pressing matter just to avoid a toolbox talk. And then, or they may come halfway through the toolbox talk to try and catch up on what they missed. This needs to be controlled because this will really destroy the importance of effective toolbox talks. If people just show up late for a toolbox talk or miss it consistently, they're sending that message that these aren't important, and they need to set a good safety example. So that's why people need to take toolbox talks seriously. There was some research done by NIOSH, the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, in 2000. So NIOSH conducted a toolbox talk case study to see how effective toolbox talks were working and what the participants had to say about it. So they've interviewed people with anywhere from 4 to 38 years of experience and gathered their feedback. So I'm going to summarize those results in the next few slides. So the instructors' feedback was they were uncomfortable presenting materials in front of others. If they were to present, they wanted quality materials that will keep the employees interested and encourage them in participating. They said employees aren't paying attention. and they don't care to be there. They just want to sign their name and leave. And they didn't have a lot of preparation time to practice for it. So those were some of the instructors' concerns when it came to presenting toolbox talks. The employees' feedback was, if they got to sit through a toolbox talk, they want quality materials that are interesting. Sometimes it seemed like it never happened. If people were rushing through to deliver that toolbox topic as fast as possible, if you're going to lose their interest right away, and that again is going to be ineffective. And they want topics that reflect the work being done. So if they work at a agricultural dealership, perhaps we could have a topic around that. Having a topic that is relevant to them or the work that they do is going to be successful in information that they're going to want to retain and understand. And again, get to the point. Don't give a real long story for the toolbox talk. Get me the information that I need to know. That's what the employees' feedback was. So in conclusion, from both parties, of what they want are real stories would get their attention. So as the presenter or the student, they want something that really happened and utilize that information, and perhaps in the same area that they came from. So if they're in Saskatchewan, maybe they want something from Saskatchewan or Western Canada or something in their environment. And they enjoy discussion questions pertaining to the story, and that facilitated participation and interest. So by having some discussion questions, it got people talking, and that was helpful to the interest level within the group. And if the employees and instructors could relate to that person, so if you could see yourself as the person in that toolbox talk, that's going to be effective as well. And they want topics reflective of the work done at their site. So as you can see by the 2000 NIOSH Toolbox Talk case study, people are looking for those relevant topics and to add some value and to get to the point and use some real stories. So as you prepare for Toolbox Talks, keep those things in mind based on the results of the NIOSH Toolbox Talk case study. So right now I'm going to conduct a mock toolbox talk. Usually a toolbox talk is on one sheet of paper, and this is going to be spread out over 5 different slides, and usually, like I said, it's on one sheet of paper. You may see that I have highlighted key areas on the toolbox talk sheet to look at, so that way I'm not reading word for word. So I've prepared and I've highlighted the areas that I want to speak to. So I will get started as in this mock situation. So first of all, I would like to welcome everyone to the Toolbox Talk this morning on the operation of self-propelled equipment on public roadways. I personally have seen the aftermath of a car that rear-ended a piece of equipment, and I know myself and you at this dealership, we want to avoid that from happening to us or someone we love and care for. And this toolbox talk will help give us some reminders on how we can be safe on our roadways among self-propelled equipment. So the work activity is, there's the slow speed of farm machinery. They're moving down the roadways, they're big, and they're not going very fast. Traffic could be impatient. They're trying to pass the pieces of equipment and get around them, or the traffic is going too fast and they have to brake just at the last second to avoid an incident from happening. So some of the incidents that have happened are left turn collisions, which most commonly happen when motorists are trying to pass a farm vehicle as the farm vehicle is making a left turn. So if I'm making a left turn with my tractor, I've slowed down and I'm turning left, and the person trying to pass me drives right into the side of my tractor. So that's a problem. Or rear-end collisions. Those frequently occur when motorists misjudge the speed of a slow-moving vehicle. and they don't have time to react and slow down properly. So if they're doing 100 kilometers an hour, they may think they have a greater stopping distance, but then all of a sudden they're right there and it's too late. Or situations are happening when passing collisions, when motorists attempt to pass a farm vehicle without realizing the width and length of that piece of equipment. So they may not understand how wide that header is that we're transporting on the front of our combine harvester. So keep in mind where the people are coming from, that they may not have all the information that you may have working at the dealership when it comes to equipment. So to assist with our toolbox talk, I actually have a picture. This happened probably about 4 days ago in Saskatchewan, and this was a situation where a vehicle, a semi tractor trailer unit, rear-ended a combine. So that's exactly what we spoke of on the previous slide, as this could happen, and this did happen. So I'm going to ask, does anyone have a story that they wish to share during this toolbox talk about sharing our roadways with large farm equipment, or a situation that they've seen or heard about? So I would pause and I would let some time for some discussion to occur. And after we've done that and collected some feedback from the employees with a personal story, so then I would go on to mention that there are some key points we can do to minimize this risk as we operate our self-propelled equipment on public roadways. We have a standard operating procedure for self-propelled equipment, and does anyone know what that procedure is? So right now I'm asking to get employee involvement, and then if they don't know it, I'm going to have it ready. Then I'm going to review that procedure. Then I'll jump to the next point, slow-moving vehicles, or an SMV emblem, that orange triangle. Be sure it's clean and visible, that it's not faded, damaged, or peeling off. Make sure that is visible on your piece of equipment. And at our dealership, when we work on equipment and the customer is going to pick it up, before it goes home, we want to ensure that we do those pre-operational checklists, that the brakes, tires, lights are working effectively, that the windows are clean and you can see out of the mirrors, and the lights are working and the markers, because we want to ensure that we're doing our part at the dealership to prevent people from being injured on the roadways. And as we go through some other points to remember about this toolbox talk is only having competent operators. So at our dealership, we have a list of 5 people that can operate these pieces of farm equipment on the roadways. And when we do that, we're using pilot cars. So that's going to help minimize that risk. But the average grain producer may not be using a pilot car. So just to be aware of that as well while you're on the roadway. So for those 5 competent operators we have, they know to drive as far to the right as possible, but without putting themselves in danger due to a soft shoulder on the roadway. So keep that in mind for these people that we have as competent operators of the farm equipment. And when you are driving down the highways and roadways, be sure that you use your turn signals to indicate your turns. Motorists following your farm equipment sometimes have situated, for example, if I have a tractor and an air seeder, so I'm pulling over to the right to make a big wide left turn because I've got an air drill, a grain cart, and a liquid wagon, and I'm trying to make a left turn. People are thinking that, oh, this person's moving over to the right so I can go past, but really I'm just trying to make a wide sweep so I can make a left turn. So that's why it is important that we have our pilot vehicles in place when we are delivering those pieces of equipment to our customers. If they are taking their pieces of equipment home, we can remind them of some of these key points. So does anyone have any other stories or other key points that they found may be effective or a good way to help promote safe operation of self-propelled equipment on public roadways? So I'd allow some time for discussion there if there is some. Then I'd say, is there any comments around this toolbox talk or questions? Do we have any suggestions for future toolbox talks? And then I'm going to conclude, as I mentioned, with a strong conclusion and say something to the effect that we all have to do our part to be safe operators of farm equipment and follow up with these reminders on how to be safe among self-propelled equipment on public roadways. So with that, that would conclude our Toolbox talk. I'm just going to sign this sign-in sheet and date it, and I'm going to circulate it. If you could sign your name and date it as well, and we would have a record of it that we've provided this Toolbox Talk information as well. So I hope this gives you guys some good key points and some good tips for operating self-propelled equipment on public roadways. And that would be it. That would be, in a nutshell, how one could conduct a Toolbox talk. So I'll leave you with the final thought today. Toolbox talks are about enhancing employee safety, not just being present long enough to sign an attendance sheet and leave. There's nothing worse than those Toolbox talks where the presenter's more concerned about, did you sign that sign-in sheet? Did everyone sign it? Are you sure you signed it? It kind of takes away from the Toolbox talk if we're more concerned about the sign-in sheet. But nevertheless, it's important to get them done and have them signed. But the Toolbox talk should be about way more than just an attendance sign-in sheet. One good Toolbox talk could be the difference between life and death. And really think about that, because that is so true. It's hard to measure sometimes those results of. We've had a Toolbox talk on self-propelled equipment on public roadways, and maybe we prevented something from happening to somebody else by that Toolbox talk. So that truly could be the difference between life and death. So I want to conclude by saying what I mentioned in this webinar today is just a sample of a process that you could use to deliver Toolbox talks at your business. Again, this was just a sample, but ultimately you can do what works best for you and adapt it as required. This was just some guidelines that could assist you. So with that, I'd like to thank you for taking